Hello everyone and welcome to State of Play, the only video games interview show that dares to ask your favorite video game designer if we can borrow their car. Today's episode is going to be called Tastemakers, and I'm sitting down with one of the most excellent tastemakers I can think of for the past few generations of games, David Jaffe. Very happy to have him, and we're very happy to speak with him today. Not everyone gets to redefine genres as he has, so let's get right to it. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Would you argue with that assumption that you are a tastemaker? Or have been?
Have been, yes. I saw something, somebody posted the new trailer of our game a few days ago, and you always go and read the comments,
right.
And most of them, thank God, were really gracious and excited about our new game. But if you were like, oh, no, it wasn't that. It was PAX. I'm doing a keynote at PAX, and everybody was like, oh, that's cool. And one guy's like, this guy hasn't been relevant, for 7 years. Why is he speaking at PAX? And you don't. Everybody's like, oh, you only. Ignore the haters, right? But you only don't ignore the haters when they're right. Did I do double negative there? Basically when someone says something about you that is hateful, you usually can ignore it because it's not true 98% of the time. But when I read that, I was like, yeah, it's not untrue. I mean. I've been on a journey of learning, and thank God, I've had great partners that have sort of gone on that journey with us, and we haven't lost anybody any money and stuff, and I hope our new game does really, really well. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm a tastemaker at this point. I think I'm a guy who loves the medium and loves all entertainment mediums and loves video games and loves making. Oh, I love making video games.
Great.
But. I'm in a, the kind, positive way to say it is I'm at a crossroads.
Yeah.
The negative, cynical way to say it is I'm kind of at the end of the game. I don't know what's next, and I definitely look at the medium, and it's so splintered, and it's so and it's wonderfully splintered, and it's wonderfully disrupted with everything from free games and 99-cent games up to these $60 and what should be more than $60 epics that take. If you look at like the amount of time people play Black Ops, it's $60. That's a bargain. Know, and so you look at the landscape, and it's like I'm going. Where do I fit in? What do I have to say? What do I have to bring to this medium that is going to be relevant? So I know. I think I've made some successful games with some amazing teams. Absolutely, but. I'm definitely at a place where now I'm going, okay, is this game's wrapping? I'm kind of going, all right, what's next? And what do I want to have next? And I think I know, and I'm kind of been afraid to say it to myself because I know what I want to do next, and I think I'm going to do it. Even to the point that PAX called me and they said, hey, come do the keynote. And I said, okay, but and they're like, okay, here's the contract, and it's like, we'll give you room and board, and we'll fly you out, and we'll put you in this nice. So I said, I don't want any of that. I said, all I want is in exchange for this. I said, just give me the smallest little fucking booth you can get for next year's PAX. Okay. Because I think I'm going to self-finance my own thing after this game wraps, and I think I'm going to use my own money and kind of be balls out with it, and. And it's going to be really interesting. I don't know if it's going to work. And it could be 5 minutes after walking out of the studio, I have another idea that I want to do. It's a big, epic, huge $60 Sony PS4 IP. But so I don't know, though. So no, I mean, that's a very long answer. But yeah, I don't know. I not only am I not currently a tastemaker, I think I am currently at a place where I question what do I have to offer to this medium anymore. And I'm okay if the answer is nothing, and I'm okay if the answer is tons more and I'm just getting started. I don't know.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, that's why we have this show. Like, the fact that you can answer so honestly about such a blanket idea is great. And that's what this is all about. It's like getting to get a big picture of David Jaffe. As over his whole career. So yeah, I mean, so let's start at the beginning.
It feels like an interrogation. Cigarettes.
Bring in the dogs.
So bring in Sharon Stone. Just don't cross your legs, and I try. We'll be okay. So anyway, so
well, let's look.
Good.
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
you worked on a couple games before you did Twisted Metal.
I did. I worked. Yes. Yeah, I did.
Cool. Because you were first working with Sony.
I've always worked with Sony.
Right. Yeah.
I started as a tester.
Right.
Out of USC.
That's great.
And yeah, I was. Oh my God, man! The resume I sent off to Sony testing department went off the same day that I went off to register to be a guy who worked at the front desk at the USC Dental School. I had no prospects.
Wow.
I wanted to be a movie director and a screenwriter, and I was out of money and I was out of school. And I remember I was taking a walk at the time with my now ex-wife, at the time friend who became my girlfriend, wife, and mom of my kids, and ex-wife. Right, so we've been on a journey together. Jeez. But And I was like, oh, I gotta be a director. I gotta be the next Spielberg. What happened? What happened to me? You know, and she's finally like, dude, get it the fuck together. It's like, go fucking find a way to make a living and do what everybody else does. And I just, you know, I'd grown up convinced that, you know, and I think it's good and bad. It's like, you know, my parents always allowed me a lot of latitude when it came to dreaming and wishing and hoping and having just big visions and dreams for myself. And I think I'm so, you know, thank God, right? Thank God. But you know, you can give a kid so much latitude that they kind of go into sort of delusions of grandeur land and expect just the world to sort of open up, you know, the red carpet or lay down the red carpet for you. And when it didn't happen, it was really kind of a shock to the system. But yeah, so ultimately, thank God Sony called me and said, hey, come in and let's do an interview. And man, I'll tell you, when they offered me that job, and it was $20 grand a year, and I couldn't fathom making $20,000. I mean, still in this economy, it's still, you know, to have a job at all, you're grateful for. But yeah, man, it was yeah. So I started with that, and we went on, and we did the first game I ever worked on was called Mickey Mania, which was an old 16-bit Sega Genesis and SNES game and Super Nintendo game.
Right.
And yeah. So we started from there.
That's amazing. Not
really.
Well,
if I'm going to be honest, you give me that's amazing. No, it's not. What are you really? What's amazing is the fact that scientists think there may actually be infinite alternate realities. Where in those alternate realities, you are like literally Satan with horns, and I could be like, you know, an angel that grew up on a farm. I mean, that's anything you can think of. There are certain scientists that say, mathematically speaking, that's amazing. Well, so give me a better description of what I just said.
No. It's amazing to me. I mean, I'm an actor and a performer, and just to imagine another's life, you know, and live that, and you know, and then imagine like living that myself. I would love to be a tester. I mean, I know that in the end, like, you know, it's not. It's like a grueling job.
It's a great entry level job. I think I know guys, and stuck is wrong. Stuck is wrong. There are great. God, I'll tell you what, man. QA and testing is so important to a great game. And so when a lot of people say, oh, you got stuck in testing, it's kind of disrespectful because it really is an important part of the process. But, you know, testing gets a bad rap because, you know, yeah, there are a lot of people who just kind of go and they play games and they don't do anything with it. But you really can use that as a springboard, you know, to a great career. I certainly have, awesome. You know, so.
That's great. I think that's great. You know, starting from in the mailroom, as it were. You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
Those stories are fantastic. They give everyone hope.
Yes. But today, man, good Lord, the mailroom today. I mean, there's so many ways to get into games today that weren't really available. But I mean, you had to really go off and learn to be just a hotshot programmer or artist, or even at the time when I started, it was 2D. But today, God, there's so many ways to get. I mean, there are freaking kids making iPhone games now and doing really well at it. So there's really no excuse anymore. Whether it's a movie you want to make or a video game,
go out and do it.
Go out and do it. Yeah.
Cool. So what was the? You were the main force behind creating Twisted Metal. Is that? Am I right in that?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you know, there's this is where you get into kind of the, you know, it's on one hand you want to respect yourself and say, hey, look, I brought a lot to the table. And on the other hand, you have to go, look, you can't do this alone.
Sure, of course.
And so, you know, I worked, the guys I'm working with at Eat, Sleep, Play, I mean, most of those guys I worked with back in 93, 94 on the first Twisted Metal. So, I mean, it was Scott Campbell, and who was one of the directors and who ran the studio, and Kellen Hatch and Michael Jackson, and all these guys. Different Michael Jackson, of course.
Right.
Which I still am delighted.
Every time I work with Michael Jackson every day.
Yeah, but you know, that guy, you know, if NeoGaf gets a hold of my Michael Jackson thing I just did, it's like a little fucking GIF now for it. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, no, I mean, so but yes, Twisted Metal was originally an idea that I had come up with and fleshed out with Mike Yam and Scott and Kellen, and so I was one of the driving forces. But in games, it's so tough because, like I said, it's really hard. You know, there are political reasons you want to not never say my game, and there are practical reasons you never want to say my game.
Sure.
But then there are also reasons you do want to say my game, because the reality is, just like someone who did, you know, who was the lead artist on God of War, I would hope he would be going around saying my level or my art or my character. Absolutely. You know? So there is a necessity of ownership, I think, that's required in this business in order to, you know, to do well in any business, certainly a creative one, you have to bring something of yourself. And I think in games it's tough because we're not unionized, and you're on a team where really incredibly talented, high-paid people, and they're staffed. You know, it's not like you've got a guy who you work with like a DP for 3 months and you never have to see him again.
Right.
And, you know these are your brothers in arms, your sisters in arms, and so you know. Everybody's contributing, but at the same time, and so there is kind of a political knee-jerk to always make sure team, which is true. You can't do without a team. I'm making board games. Right. You know what I'm saying? At the same time, though, there has to be room to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that there are always members of the team, whether they're the designer, the director, the lead artist, or a guy, you know, I don't mean low level in terms of pecking order, but in terms of just sort of where he sits in the hierarchy, a low level, you know, level designer or level builder that really bring their heart and soul to the project, and that's what gives it a lot of its spirit. And I think it's important. I think it's a real hard thing to talk about, given the potential ramifications. You know, this airs and it goes back to Eat, Sleep, Play, and I'm not saying this is Eat, Sleep, Play's issue, but it's every team I've ever worked on. Right. It's like Jaffe says it's his game. I was fucking, and they're right. I was here till 4 a.m, 3 nights a week for the last 6 months, and they're absolutely right. Right. At the same time, you know, there is a lot of personal stuff of me, of Scott, of Kellen in these games that we make. So it's a long answer. So.
All right. No, it's a good answer. So, were those first 2 games? Did they come out as you pictured in those first Twisted Metal games? Did you guys have to like leave a lot on the floor? Was it
Twisted 1? We left a lot. Yeah. Twisted 1 really was never even. You know, Twisted Metal became the sort of a great. I was very proud. We got a lot of really great Game of the Year awards. We got a great Game of the Year award from EGM, and we got. I think we were like ranked one of the best multiplayer games of all time for Twisted 2. But multiplayer was never meant to be the bread and butter of that game. It was meant to be this kind of adventure, you know. And all the levels are like, it was almost like Grand Theft Auto. Our first crack at it was this huge city that you could drive around, and this was back in PS1 days. And at the last minute, I remember taking a walk on the beach and just being like hyperventilating because I'm like, this is not working, it's not working, it's not working. And Scott and I and Kellen is like, let's just chop it up. And suddenly Twisted Metal 1 became 6 levels, 80% of them based on that one big level. And we were going to have missions, and we were going to have, you know, more of a story and more of an adventure, and it just kind of became what it was because of necessity, because of time. And one day, a great programmer who's still with us named Randy Zorko, Scott comes into the office in Utah, and he had just kind of ripped out some levels and made them split screen. And this is before the internet, really, so that's how you did your multiplayer. Local. And everyone was like, this is so much fucking fun. And suddenly that became the focus of Twisted Metal. Cool. So the essence, the spirit of the world and the characters, yes, but in sort of what we wanted it to be, which was sort of looking at classic Hollywood car chases and sort of stunts in movies back then, we wanted it to be that came through. Cool. But the nuance and the specifics of the gameplay, it changed up until the last minute. Twisted 2 was obviously a lot more. That's why everybody's always like, oh, the sequel is always the best. Because the first game really is everything from inventing your technology to finding your game. It's almost like you're writing the screenplay. If you're talking the movie analogy, you're writing the screenplay when you make the first game, because there are no screenplays in video games. People say, oh, design documents. But you know, when you make a game, it's iterative. You've got this works, this doesn't, all the stuff you think's going to work, doesn't work. And so the first game is usually like, we finally know what our game is. And it's like, okay, ship it. It's like, you know. And so it's the second game when you've already established, this is now what Twisted Metal is. This is now what God of War is, whatever. Now you're able to go in and say, okay, now we've built our foundation. We know what the game is. Now let's get even more creative. And that's why the second ones in games are always better than the first ones. Whereas in movies, you tend to think the second one, except in rare cases,
Right.
isn't as good as the first.
Right.
So
That's funny. See, 'cause I've always taken it, or lately, you know, I read a lot of game blogs and, you know, or well, not a lot, a few, but I, you know, play a lot of games, think about a lot of games, and people always say like, well, hopefully this one sells enough to get a sequel, and
Yeah.
in my mind, that was always like a cop-out in a way. It's like, why do we always have to talk about sequels? Like, why can't we just appreciate what this game is, you know, without having to worry about it, you know, going on? Like, I mean, so do you find that though? I mean, when most people make games, do you think they have a second one in mind? Like,
well, you know, by the very nature of making, you know, video games, you have to cut. You know, on our new game, we've had to cut a lot of stuff, and so a lot of it is just more. I really wish we could have done X, Y, Z, and hey, maybe if we get to make a sequel, we get to do that, right? So I'm sure that's always a part of it. Excuse me. Every game I've ever worked on, you know, certainly towards alpha, which is when you're getting towards the end, you have to make those hard choices, and they're not hard choices. Usually, again, this you know, we were talking about film earlier, not on the show, but before we started shooting, so film's on my mind right now. But you know, with a movie, you make cuts to make the story better or the movie better. With a game, yes, that happens as well. You cut things out that aren't fun, but you also cut things out that you love that you just aren't going to have time to get into the game. And so a lot of those things you wish could have been in the first game. You know, but it's like any other creative process, right? It's like you cut out of sometimes necessity and out of lack of fun, and that gives birth to hopefully even better ideas because of the concessions that you've had to make. And so, you know, yeah, it's definitely, it's always painful, but in terms of the sequels, you know, I don't know. I think games are so expensive, and they're so expensive to buy that, you know, you know, you put out a game, and especially if you're a developer, and you're talking about a $60 game, you put out a $60 game that's cost your studio or cost the publisher to pay your studio anywhere from, I mean, this is absurd to say 8 million because they're never 8 million anymore, but let's just say 8 million to 70 million, which is really the range. And more realistically, we're talking probably this generation and next, you know, 30 to 80 million in that range. And it doesn't work. You want a sequel because you want to keep working, you know. And so if you're talking playing at that level or making those kind of games, yeah, that's also a reason that you want a sequel. And consumers want it. I mean, because the people who actually buy the games and don't rent them, you know, at Redbox for $1 a night or whatever, you know, it's an expensive investment. And so when they find, like, I'll tell you, Darksiders 2 was announced, and I can't wait. Even though it's like, well, why would you want a sequel? Get something brand new. And I agree, I love the new stuff as well. But you know, when something works,
why not have
you want more of it?
Does that is it something that like fills you with pride? Like, do you feel like you touched a nerve? Like, does it reinforce your ideas of, like, you know, or has it in the past reinforced your ideas of, you know, being on the right track as, you know, being a designer and like making?
You know, no, it really hasn't. You know, the successes that you have, I have found, don't really stick with you, and the failures stick with you a lot. Yeah. In the best of ways, in the sense that the failures stick with you because you can learn from them. To make the successes, but the successes don't really stick with you because I think if you're successful, it's because you're working from your gut, and if you're working from your gut, you knew all along it was the right thing to do anyway. And so when it actually hits, you're appreciative, and it's nice, and it's kind of a nice little ego stroke for a couple days, but it's always existed in that place in your brain of, well, of course this is the shit, you know. and so you know, you don't have that, you know, that that sort of, you don't have that perspective on it because it already exists in that place in your brain where you think it's great. So at least that's how I have responded to successes that we've had. Cool. But you know, when something works, why not have you want more of it? You know, but there is that diminishing returns, and after, you know, they just announced on the internet today. I don't know if they've announced the game. I don't know if they're even making the game. This is how far out of Sony's, you know, circle of trust. Not circle of trust. I was talking about, what was that movie with De Niro? I didn't mean it in a negative way. But it's, I'm not in their. I'm not. You know, they don't call me with insider information. So they may or may not be making a God of War 4. As we tape this, I couldn't tell you. But it was interesting to see there was a rumor that leaked saying, oh, they're going to make a God of War 4. and just to go online to the websites and kind of see the response. It's definitely kind of, I think it's gotten to the point that if they don't kind of freshen it up, there is a sense of, okay, you know, we've had enough, which I don't think speaks poorly to any of the God of War games. I just think it speaks to the natural cycle of entertainment. There comes a point where you've had enough and you want something new. And I think it's a good business to kind of, you know just that right time to get off the stage, stay on long enough, and then know when enough encores, it's time to go away for a while. And then you're great, because 8 years, 10 years later, you come back and everyone has the nostalgia factor, and then they love you again. You know, so.
Well, that opens up two questions for me. One that we'll get to later, but one I want to go back to really quickly.
This is a metaphor. This is becoming a metaphor.
Right.
As the interview goes on, this is becoming a metaphor for how I see life. We started up here, and now, what's happening? So,
bringing on all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
No. Like Twisted Metal 3 and 4.
Yes.
Different studios. What did you have to do with those games going away?
Going to other studios?
Going to other studios. Well, were you done working on it at that point?
Well, what had happened was we had just done, we'd done 2.
Right.
And I wasn't with the company that did 2. I was with Sony.
Okay.
And so that company, which was called Single Track at the time, I think they were looking for sort of at least their leads. I know the guys on the team who I work with now would have loved to have kept doing Twisted Metals, but their kind of bosses of that company were looking for. I think they were wanting to become a publisher, or a lot of things were happening, and so it didn't make sense for them to say, "Hey, Sony, let's keep doing these," even though Sony wanted to. So they kind of went off, and Sony was like, yeah, but we got to keep the franchise going because it's lucrative and people like it. And so they kind of went to some of their internal studios in San Diego. And so I wasn't really involved. I wasn't with the Utah guys. I was with Sony, but I wasn't with Sony San Diego. So I stayed with Sony and said, well, I'll go make my own thing, which wasn't Twisted Metal. It was a game called Dark Guns, which we never shipped, because that was a great lesson for me, which was, there are some people out there that can do producing and designing, but not many. And I certainly don't fall into the category of someone who can do both. And it was a nightmare. It was I'm overweight now, but I was really overweight. I was because I eat when I'm stressed.
Right.
I was stressed constantly because on one hand I was trying to sort of serve the creative master in me and do this thing that I was really passionate about. And at the same time, I'm worried about hiring and this woman's morale, and worried about, I lived close to the studio, so I drive by with my wife at the time to go to dinner, and the lights weren't on, and I'm like, oh shit, they're not working. They're supposed to be working, And it was even if I wasn't doing the creative, I'm not a manager kind of brain, but to do both, it was good though, because at the end of the day, it was a great lesson. I met some great people who went on to have substantial impact in my career in a positive way, and so it worked out. But yeah, it was that was a nightmare. Absolutely, it was terrible. Experience. So.
Well, then we won't talk too much about that.
I'm fine.
What was? Just give me a couple of sentences about what that game was.
It was basically. I do this. I clearly tend to do this in my career. It basically was sort of an overhead to a 3D shooter, very much like Raiden, but it was you played the role of a UFO who had come to Earth, and you were basically kind of blowing the shit out of Earth. And it was really meant to be very baudy and Mad Magazine, and kind of it was very inspired by R. Crumb, and trying to be kind of X-rated without being X-rated. Sure. And the same damn thing happened, and I need to make sure I don't repeat this pattern, because the same thing happened on Calling on Cars. Calling on Cars, both of those games were me saying, I want to get away from these. At the time, Twisted Metal 2 was a pretty big game in terms of just content. And I was like, both of those games were responses to me going, I got to do something small. I got to do something more mechanics driven, more pure game driven. And both of them started cartoony and X-rated. And Twisted Metal Small Brawl started cartoony and X-rated. Wow. And every single motherfucking time, there were people on the team, and I'd never push back. And every single time they failed. And I'm not saying, look, Calling Out Cars had a number of issues gameplay-wise that I think if we would have had another 4 or 5 months, we would have absolutely solved. There was just a lot of learning that went on. And, what is a PSN game? What is it worth? Right. How much content needs to be on there to justify the price point? Right. But above all of that, thematically speaking, it was just fucking wrong. And to this day, it's like, I'm in the process now of sort of, taking in all the lessons of the last 3 years and the last 4 years. And it's been It's been like this is what we said when we started this in terms of sort of either a crossroads or an end.
Right.
It's been an amazing lesson, you know, for me working with my current studio because, you know, it's basically, here's what I'll say: God of War finished. I was with Sony for a while, and it made a lot of money.
Right. And
I did well. I'm not saying Sony's an incredibly generous company, great royalty bonus program for the employees. So I'm not saying this is not like, oh, Sony didn't give a shit. But as I've said already in the press, what we made as individuals compared to what that game made for the studio, my soul couldn't justify it. I couldn't go on, you know. And people were like, well, why didn't you make another game? And I'm like, I couldn't go through that again. You know, because making games is really hard, you know, and it's draining, and it's a wonderful job, but it's emotionally painful at times. And I couldn't go through it again and give it my all again, only to emerge, you know, and not because of me, but because of me and a great team that would do it with me. Only to emerge, hopefully, with another big hit that made other people or shareholders or whatever tons of fucking money. Right. And I'm going, you know, I can't afford to live in the house I want to live in, you know. And I'm not saying I want to live in a mansion. I don't, you know. But you know, and I was like, this doesn't make sense to me, you know. And so that was the reason I left, which I wasn't angry at Sony. They funded our company. It was just it's like that's, you know, they have every right to every dollar they've made. They funded the game. They own it. I hold them no ill will. But I was like, I need to change the formula up a little bit because I can't do that again. But unfortunately, what happened was. I kind of jumped into a situation where it was more about the money than the creative. And I find the team at Eat, Sleep, Play just incredibly talented and incredibly hardworking. But we really are different. And I should have recognized it with Heartland, which was a game that I was designing when I was at Sony, which was really meant to be this, you know, I don't know if we would have pulled it off, even if I would have had, you know, the world's most inline development team working with me. But it was meant to be an emotional war game. I wanted to try to do that. Now, I don't know if I could have done it, but let's assume there was a shot. It was a great lesson that it was the wrong team, you know, but and that's why it is such a team effort. It's like they didn't want to do that. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them were like video games. It's not art. Why can we fucking blow shit up in a cool way and make it fun? And that's great. There's that's a great path. I love games like that, you know. But I think that should have been a sign. And I was so tied into this idea of, hey, I gotta get a way to make some money, you know, some real fucking money. I had 2 kids now, you know. And so it was just like, I didn't even have a conscious awareness of going, hey, you're going into a path that artistically, this is going to hurt you. This is going to be fucking painful, dude. Because this is not a good love connection, you know. I didn't even have the awareness. It was just about, hey, these guys have sold a company before, it'll be part of my company, we're gonna get rich. And so we went from canceling Heartland, because it would just, I mean, trust me, games don't get canceled that are going great. So yes, the official reason, and it was absolutely true, is that they were also making Warhawk at the time, and we had to sort of shift resources continually to that title, because it was a much more important title at the time. But trust me, if people had been picking up Heartland, and even its most rudimentary state, and going, holy fuck, there's something here, that game would have shipped a long time ago. And so then we go on to Calling All Cars, and that's a game that was meant to be edgy and baudy and appealing to people who had just spent $599 US on a goddamn PS3. But it's a very expensive system at the time. And so, you know, you're basically talking about hardcore gamers, people who are probably adults. And if they're going to respond to a cartoon visual, it's going to have to be something like it was originally intended, which was meant to be ironic. It was meant, you know, and like I said, Arcrum was an influence, and sort of, you know, Fritz the Cat and kind of X-rated comics. And we had some guys on the team, and I respect this position, that's just not what they like to do. And that's great. I'm not mocking that position, but I am saying that as a co-owner of that company, I should have been like, you know, then we either need to change this game, or we need to have a conversation with those individuals and say, look, this is what we feel is in the best interest of this game and ultimately this company. And instead I was like, okay, And so we shipped it as sort of a benign, G-rated, cartoony game, and it didn't appeal to fucking anybody, even though there are fans of it from a core mechanic standpoint.
Right.
And so, yeah, and so I think for me, you know, it really is an issue now of going, you know, you have to chase the money, but you have to also chase the creative spirit. It's got to be a meld, you know. And so I know there was a question in there that you asked that that I wanted to get back to. But this was a way to get to it in a long way, but yeah, I mean, regardless of your question, no offense, I'm sure it was a great question.
It was awesome. It was amazing.
It was brilliant. I don't remember it, but yeah. So I mean, my point there to that was, yeah, it's kind of a constant learning experience, development. It's a constant shift of, you know, what motivates you and what gets you up in the morning. And I think, you know, I'm definitely thinking about getting back to those things that originally were motivating to me. Cool. Haven't in a while.
Going back, you know, you said that you felt burned after God of War, after feeling like the team wasn't remunerated in the ways they should have been. Mm-hmm. Was there something? Were you surprised? I mean, were there ideas that weren't based out of your contract that you thought might come around later, like certain bonuses or something? Like, I mean, if you sign a contract like that.
I don't have we never had contracts.
Oh, really?
There was never a contract.
So you guys wow.
I mean, I was a full-time employee.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, it's not like the movies. We're not unionized. We don't have sort of deal memos. And it's kind of like you come to work for Sony. You're Sony employee number 28,642, and you do your work, and they pay you great and give you great benefits. They're a super company to work for, and to their credit, they do. Every 3 or 4 months, you get royalties or bonuses based on the title you worked on. But there's no guarantee of that. Right. And again, this is not a criticism. It's they're the publisher. They've paid for it. That's the deal you enter into. And I have absolutely no ill will about God of War. Right. It was more of a sense of the awareness of I can't do that again. Right. So
cool. So, Eat, Sleep, Play has been around for 7 years now?
No, I think we started it in, 2008.
2008? Oh, wow.
3.5, 4 years.
3.5, why am I? And you guys have been working on Twisted Metal in some form or another for a couple of years, right? Like, there are a couple canceled versions?
No. We finished up Calling All Cars, and we just did a real quick port of a PSP game that those guys had done. I didn't work on it. I did a couple level design on it for PS2. And then we started Twisted. And so we had a couple of, I don't even know if they're missteps, but I mean, we originally started the new Twisted to be more like Midnight Club meets Twisted Metal.
Okay,
I wanted it very much to be, I still think it's a stronger idea. I mean, I wanted it very much to be sexier and more urban and, more, I wanted to appeal more to the world versus just America. Twisted Metal is a very American, kind of viewpoint of things. Right. It's yellow New York City taxi cabs and ice cream trucks. And it's very rock and roll and grunge. It's very Americana. And we do have fans all over the world, but nowhere near as many as we have in America. And so I was kind of going both because of what I was really into. I was really getting into a lot of kind of, hip hop and rap and stuff like that. And I really liked the aggression and sort of the swagger that you got in that kind of music. And I was like, I want to figure out a way to kind of capture that in a video game. And so part of it was that, and part of it was also going, this is probably going to, it doesn't mean we don't want to lose the characters, we don't want to lose the personality, but it was like, I think it's going to be more of a worldwide success if we do that, and games are getting so expensive that we had to kind of keep our eye on, Japan and Europe and America and Australia, not just America anymore to break even. And but again, that's a great example of a mismatch with the team. I would go out there and I still look at the piece of concept art that we have a great artist on the team called his name's Owen, who's done some amazing work for us, amazing artist, and. He did a version that was kind of almost like a cross between like Mike Tyson and almost like Akon, the rapper, the singer, and of Sweet Tooth.
Oh, wow.
You know, and he had like, instead of flaming hair, he had this just really bold, great orange tattoo and on his bald head and stuff. And I was like, you know, okay, I get that that's not the guy in the clown mask.
Right.
But it's like, it's 2011. Let's
Let's do something.
Yeah. People like rap music. People like hip hop. It's not. It's, you know. And I'm not criticizing the guys that didn't like it. I'm just saying that again, it should have been a sign of like, dude, you know, you're mismatched with this group. They're a great group, but they're not for you. You know, and so it was tough. But yeah, it was meant to be that, and it kind of, I think what happened was it took a long time for our technology, because this was back, you know, PS3 when it first launched. You know, a lot of teams, including us, struggled to kind of get our hands in the, you know, around it. And so for a while, our graphics were really struggling, and when we were trying to present more of a real world, we wanted the real world sort of hyper real is what we called it, kind of like Michael Bay's version of, you know, when he films a street scene in Los Angeles, it's not documentary style, it looks slick and sexy, and you know, and we wanted our game to look that way, but we didn't have the tech at the time, and so what ended up happening was, for the longest time going down that road, things just looked generic, and so we all kind of knee-jerked and said, well, you know, we don't want to get canceled, we're a new developer, it's a new game, let's go back to what people know, because they're asking for personality. And I think if we would have stayed the course, it would have had a great deal of personality, but we just, you know, I'm included in this. I mean, I certainly didn't have enough, I don't know if bravery is the right word, or confidence that we would get there in time before Sony was kind of like, guys, this just kind of looks like generic world, let's not do this game. And so I think we just kind of immediately said, fuck it, let's put the clown back in. And you know, it's worked. I mean, fans like it, and I think we're going to have a real successful game when it ships, but at least I hope so. You never know, but in this market. But yeah. So again, just as I sit here and talk to you, and I'll send you, you know, you send me the bill for therapy. You know, I sit here and I do. It's like, wow, there's another example of where it was a really big, you know, mismatch. You know, in terms of just sort of creative spirits being friends. I love these guys. They're such good guys and ladies out there, but it's just not a good. It's not a good creative marriage. So yeah.
When you first had the idea a few years ago of going back to Twisted Metal, was it an idea of hey, you know, this is was it more of an idea of like going to a gold mine, or like going back to the well in a way? Like, do you understand? You know what I mean?
It was a fear-based decision, in the sense that we had just put out Calling All Cars. We had started the company because we said, hey, we want to do these small games. Now, at the time, you know, iPhone wasn't out yet, and, you know, but all that really existed really in a significant way in the digital download space was XBLA and PSN.
Right.
And we were like, fuck, this is great. We love these kind of games. We want to make these kind of games. And we did Calling All Cars, and I said, you know, there was a lot of reasons it didn't work, but it didn't work, and we were like, oh, shit. What do we, you know. And so what we should have done looking back, in my opinion, was stay the course. And, all right, let's wipe our bloody noses and get back out, get off the mat and try again. What do we learn, you know? And instead we were like, fuck, let's go back to Twisted Metal. Because we know there's a fan base. And I don't regret it, because I mean, some of the best design I've ever done is in this new Twisted Metal. Like, I'm so proud of it. But I think creatively speaking, yeah, it was more of, well, let's do a PSN version of Twisted Metal, because that way we at least know we'll make our money back. And you know, when you own a business and you're responsible for the people who work there, you want to make decisions that are creative and good, but at the same time responsible. And so we started as a very small game, and it just ended up being, you know, Sony really liked what they saw, and they ended up saying, hey, let's add a little more. Hey, can we get a single player? And hey, can we get stories? And it kind of became organically a full $60 retail Blu-ray game. And again, I'm super happy it did, because I really think it's turning out great. But yeah, no, it definitely, it wasn't let's go back to the well. I mean, we definitely thought, hey, we have some really cool ideas here. But I think if I would have been a little braver, and maybe, I don't know if it was bravery on Scott's part, you'd have to ask him sort of what his reasoning was. But for me, yeah, I think it was like, well, it wasn't fun not having a hit. Calling up, it's not, you know, I don't like that feeling. I mean, you know, but so I should have stayed. You know, it's whenever I make decisions out of fear, they always bite me in the fucking ass. So.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Cool. Well, real small. That I have seen the recent trailer that and there's like robots in the game now. Like. Kind of. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
It's not, people saw the trailer and think it's like a robot game. Right. It's not. It's just, we actually had a trailer cut that had this whole middle section, which was straight up pure car combat in New York City. But marketing, to their credit, they're really good at it's sort of, this trailer's too long, this needs this.
Sure.
So, it's just too long. And so we cut out all the car combat, and now it kind of looks like Twisted Metal. In that trailer is the Transformers.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, that's one boss, and that's one vehicle that can transform into a flying robot.
Right.
But that's not the
that's
game.
right.
It's
okay.
a small percentage of the game.
Cool. Cool.
But anyway, yeah. So that's a cool trailer. I thought it was pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah, it's pretty excellent. Let's talk about your relationship with Sony. Is there a big philosophy behind how they do things that you see as different from the other, from Microsoft and Nintendo? Or?
I don't, because I've never worked at those other
Right.
companies, I wouldn't know what those other companies are like compared. I can tell you, just like any other company, whether you're an employee or you're a partner like we are now with them, or even if you're just a fan, you stand back and you watch things, just like probably if you're a fan of sports or, a movie director or anything that you like. And there are days they do things you're like, fuck yeah, man, these fuckers rock. And there are days you're like, what the fuck are you motherfuckers thinking? So, but that's everything. What I can tell you that has been consistent from day one, and I was with Sony from '93 to 2007, right? Mm-hmm. So I saw a lot of changes of executives, not just in PlayStation's group, but at the very tippy top of the pyramid. And what I can tell you is they put a huge value on honesty and loyalty and treating people well. They're not, I hear a lot of stories about publishers, that are kind of shady or don't pay on time, or Sony is they're really good people, and it doesn't, I don't know what my future is with that company, but I can tell you that my experience working with them and for them from '93 now to 2011 has been nothing in terms of sort of the people than just absolutely positive in terms of just genuinely just good people. You don't get lied to, and you trust them. And it's nice to work with people that you genuinely trust.
Cool.
Yeah.
The NGP.
Yes.
Coming out. Is that something you see yourself possibly working on in the future? Is there anything?
Yeah, I mean,
excite you?
Technologically, it excites me. I haven't gotten a lot of hands-on time with it. I don't know about the handheld market anymore, and this is nothing insightful. Many people are questioning now because Android a little bit, but certainly the iPhone, the iPad, iPod Touch have really made such inroads that how many of those people that used to play straight up handheld games are now more than satisfied with cheaper games, a lot more games, and a lot more functionality. And so that kind of leaves the space. And how big is that space for people who just want to walk around with a separate device for gaming? And I don't know. And so for me as a gamer, I don't know, it's like I don't really care about the DS, even though I think it's impressive, the 3DS, because I'm like, well, I can probably get a lot of the smaller experiences, which those tended to be good at over on my iPhone.
Yeah.
And then on the NGP, I'm like, I'm sure it's a great system, and I'm sure I'll play some stuff and love it. But if I'm going to play console kind of games, I kind of wonder if I want to play those on my TV.
Right.
And if I'm going to play little games, and it's systems only as good as its software. So if NGP or Vita comes out and it's filled with 100 $199 games that are exclusive to that system, and they just beat the crap out of what's over here on the iPad, then absolutely. But I think there's not enough. I don't know enough yet. So if Sony came to me and said, "Hey Jaffe, we'd like you to do a handful of these really small games that are exclusive to this system, that are meant to sell for $1.99, I'd love to take a crack at that, absolutely. But I don't know if somebody were to say, and I love the idea of doing a big adventure on that system in terms of just, I love the concept of somebody being able to walk around, and wherever they are, they have this but they have this big epic world in this little device.
Right.
But I think the question there is just from a development standpoint is, are there going to be enough people to merit that kind of budget for that kind of experience that want to have that versus I'll just give it to me on my PS3 or my PS4 or whatever, because are you really going to want to play a game like God of War in little bite-sized chunks? I don't know, but I think technologically it's exciting. It may have an incredibly bright future, but it's this, like I said when we started, this whole industry is so disrupted now,
Right.
Because of digital downloads and
Right.
the iPad and the iPhone and Sony. It's hard to say,
Hard to, yeah.
but so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with it for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, you want to give us an idea of maybe like down the road, like what you're thinking about, like what something that is moving you towards your next project, like?
Well, I have, we're finishing up this game,
Right.
and I don't know when your show will air, but I haven't announced. I'm going to be leaving my current company, and when we finish, whenever that is, and which I'm not thrilled in the sense that I love some of these guys are just great guys to work
Right.
with and ladies to work with, but I'm thrilled because I think it's about time to get back to sort of a center that really is in need of nurturing and love and respect.
Sure.
And to that end, there's a few things. I mean, it's as you would expect. It covers, it runs the table of
Right.
another really big, epic retail box product, all the way down to some iPhone games. But I'll tell you the thing that right now, and again, this we talked earlier, this may change.
Right.
But I've looked at my bank account and I've looked at my investments, and I'm every time if you go to my house and you look at my home office, this huge whiteboard, and there's like 8 things I could do next. And I'm taking meetings all week with agents and developers and publishers about but the one that I keep coming back to is this one that says self-fund this indie game.
Cool.
And I'm like, are you fucking nuts? You've got these 2 kids, and
Right.
you've got this mortgage. What are you doing? It's not like, again, I mean, Sony treated me great with God of War, but it's not like I'm living. A lot of people think Jaffe's living in a mansion. It's
Right.
like, no, I'm not.
Right.
I'm not living in the poorhouse either.
Sure.
I have it good, but when you start spending your own money. But I think what it is games have gotten, at least the games I've been working on, have gotten so big and so complicated that they're out of necessity and responsibility. I don't look at it like it's a negative. I understand, but when you're spending upwards of $20 to $80 million, and I know a game now that's $80 million.
Wow.
What? Which is great. I don't complain about it. It's like,
Right.
wow, that's amazing. But at the same time, it's like, holy shit, that's a
Wow.
lot of money. Of course, the companies that put that money out are going to want a lot more say.
Return.
And what occurred to me recently was my career up until this point had really been in an industry where I got to act like an indie, but I got all the support of a full fucking publisher. So everybody can look at God of War and Twisted Metal and say, oh, those are just kind of AAA, not AAA like Jaffe, you're so great and your teams are so great, but in terms of kind of they're meant to be big successes at Walmart and Target and
Right.
GameStop and whatnot. But I got to do what I wanted. I had a great boss for the longest time, and it was kind of like, hey, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do next? And to me, that was what excited me. And now it really has become much more of, I don't want to say, designed by committee or a bureaucracy, because it's not, again, Sony has always, championed the artistry of games from back in 94, 95 with PS1. So it's not like some oppressive Terry Gilliam Brazil kind of,
Right.
It's still a very creative industry even at that level. But I think for me, what the last few years has shown me is that I'm not having as much fun when there are this many fucking cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I just don't like it as much. I don't like dealing with I don't like being told no
Right.
as often as I have been I've been told no more often in the last 2 years than I was told in my entire fucking career up until the last 2 years. And I'm just, no. I mean, fuck you. I mean, I had dinner a couple of weeks ago with some really influential, important people in the industry that could very well come forward and say, hey, here's some money, go make a game. And I found myself going, why am I pitching to you? And I don't mean that in a negative way, because these guys are amazing. It's not.
Right.
I don't mean, but I would say that to anyone at this
Right.
point. Not because I'm the shit, but because I've gotten spoiled and used to. I mean, the whole reason I started as a tester when we talked about it, because I was just looking for a way to pay the rent
Right.
while I was going in to make movies. And lo and behold, that industry and that particular, working at Sony at that time allowed me this amazing creative freedom to express myself and sort of just really love that part of it. And so for me, that's become my experience that I kind of demand now. And it doesn't mean that I'm the shit. I could be the worst designer in the world. I'm not saying I know what I'm doing, but once you get used to something, it's really, if the world of games today, if I had entered the world of games today as a tester back when I was 21, it would have been a paycheck. And I would have gone into movies or something else because I'm kind of like, well, no, this isn't as fun, you know?
Right.
And so for me, yeah, I'm looking at it sort of, especially now when you've got the ability to sort of self-fund and put something out there that, and again, I'm not looking to make, you know, super arty-farty. That's not me, you know.
Right.
I want to make things that are entertaining and commercial, but
Sure.
but the idea of spending my own money and controlling the price and controlling the marketing, and now will it be substantially smaller? Of course. I can't do what Sony does.
Right.
But that's the one that keeps coming back to me.
Cool.
It's like, I think I need to do that. And I think, you know, I read a great quote, you know, it was actually from Mark Twain, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't quote well.
Sure.
But the gist is basically, you know, in 20 years you'll regret the things that you didn't do, not the things you did do.
Right.
And, you know, I think this will be one of those things. In 20 years I'll be 60. And if I look back and say, oh, I never did that, I think I would be very sad.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good. I think that's the reason we all want to do art, and because it's passion, and yeah, it doesn't go away. It's that little bug in your ear.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, you'll always wonder why.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
fuck that.
Yeah,
Fuck
exactly.
that. And when
I
you
agree.
have kids, even more, because what are you showing them?
Right, exactly.
It's like, what do you, I mean, think about that. Think about the parents.
Right.
I mean, I get you want to raise your kids and protect your kids. It's great, great instinct. But think about that. What you're basically saying is, welcome to a, you know, Charles Dickens nightmare. It's like, work for the man, never follow your passion,
Right.
and fucking hope you die.
Right.
I mean, what is that? You know, no, I don't want to show my, what a terrible lesson to show my kids. So, as is homelessness. So I have to balance the,
Right,
you know,
right.
the two things, you know.
Well, so with a game, as we talked about before, you know, redefining genres, a game like God of War, you know, comes along, and suddenly it seems like every action game that comes out is using a lot of the same fundamental design ideas and structures. Do you feel like the games industry is okay doing that, or that it's simply evolutionary, you know, ideas that are introduced, and then, you know, people take from it what they will? And is it okay do you feel okay with that so many games have become sort of God of War clones?
Yes, for a couple of reasons. One is that, you know, I made God of War with the team because I wanted to play that game.
Exactly.
And I've played that game now.
Right.
So all the God of, I didn't play Dante's Inferno. You know, I not because I have anything against it, because I didn't even play Castlevania. Because I've played, you know, I got that out of my system. You know, I made what I wanted to play, and we made what I wanted to play, and hopefully the team wanted to play at least most of it. I remember standing backstage at the Hollywood Bowl, and Kojima comes up to me, and I'd never met him, and he's like, holy shit.
Oh my God.
And he's like, oh, we should work together. We should do Castlevania with the God of War team.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, fuck, you know.
Okay.
So part of it's because I personally, as a gamer, I'm like, you know, I don't care, you know, as long as it's fun, I don't care.
Right.
But the other thing is, I think, you know, there's two things I find interesting. One is that mechanics, you know, we all stand on each other's shoulders.
Exactly.
You know, mechanics especially. I mean, if you're talking about intellectual property and sort of stories and characters and individual set pieces that are meant to evoke, that's a problem.
Right.
I don't see that happening. I see what we're talking about is sort of taking their intellectual property and using mechanics that we, you know, didn't create, but sort of took, you know, inspiration from other games. Onimusha, Devil May Cry, even like there was a Hulk game that Radical did back in the day where Hulk had a grab move where he could pick people up, and we're like, oh, that's great. That's, you know, we're like, that's a great way to communicate, you know, character through gameplay.
Right.
You know, all the way back to, you know, Pitfall and you know.
Totally.
So mechanics, no. I mean, mechanics are like, oh, hey, you know, Wells used a close-up and a moving camera.
Right, exactly.
And
Right.
you can't, you know. What I will say that I find interesting and telling and worrisome is, on one hand, you have all these people like games are art, you know, who gives a fuck, you know?
Right.
But interesting that what we notice, like no one's going around bitching at people for ripping off Orson Welles after he made Citizen Kane. Well, you used a dolly shot, and you know, and why? Because movies and linear and sort of storytelling medium is more capable of putting what makes them special front and center, which is their stories and their characters and their mood and their atmosphere. Games, as much as we want to wrap ourselves in the trappings of an artistic medium,
and the characters,
it doesn't mean, and I'm not sitting here saying games can't evoke emotion. I'm not saying games can't one day be, you know, as relevant, if not more, in terms of sort of emotion and intellectual stimulation as, say, movies or literature. But I think it's very telling that the question itself even exists, because it means that what you notice more about those experiences were the mechanics, and you didn't notice the other stuff as much. And so to me, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's almost like games are shouting to us and saying, we're about the gameplay. We're about the interactivity. We're about what your brain is doing and thinking and mulling over when you're trying to figure out, how do I get to that ladder across that chasm? You know, is there artistry in games? Maybe, but if there is, it's going to come from the mechanics, and it's going to come from understanding interactivity and gameplay. And instead, it's easy because we're visual, but we've gotten so wrapped up since the graphics have gone 3D and they've gotten so beautiful, and the sound and all the ability that film has had for, you know, over 100 years, we've been able to sort of, you know, adopt. And we've made the mistake of assuming that that is why we're artistic, and we've forgotten what makes us special. And the question you ask, I think, is such a great spotlight onto the truth about why we're special, because that's what you're noticing. You're noticing the game underneath it, and that's why, you know, it becomes, hey, you're ripping that off. It's like, well, so I think it's interesting.
Why not? Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's like you can dress up something as much as you like, but if there's no input from the player to like move, you know, to move a character in certain ways, you know, just at all, then you don't have a game, you know. And so,
and then can you have a great game? And then above that, can you have a great game that actually potentially through the gameplay says or means something? I don't know. Maybe. There are people who say, chess is a metaphor for life. Maybe it is. 99% of the people who play chess probably don't get that. And so can a video game's mechanics actually evoke emotion and intellectual stimulation? Maybe, maybe not. But if it's got to be obvious or obvious enough. It can't be something that only if you take a video game class at USC and the teacher says, did you notice in Eco, you know, no, it's got to be something that hits you on a level that you don't need it explained to you.
Exactly.
And that so far is missing.
Exactly. And I think those games will, without anyone ever having to talk about it, you know, those games will make their point for games as art as you play them and as they sell.
There are blips. There are hints on the radar. I mean, hints on the radar. There are blips on the radar. There are moments in games that have done that. They haven't been strung together into a cohesive experience. I think Flower has come close, but I wonder if you take away the trappings of Flower, if you take away the trappings of Journey. Now, I think, like I said, Flower is in my top 10 games of all time. So I'm not sitting here throwing stones at that game company. I think they're an amazing success story, and I look forward to all that they do. But I bring it up because I think they're currently the poster child for video games as art. And again, this is not, it's going to come off like it's not. Again, I love Flower. I'm looking forward to Journey. But what is Flower without the trappings? And there is an argument that can be made that says, well, yeah, but what is, you know, what is a movie without the actor? You know, okay, but the essence, though, of what I responded to in Flower didn't come from the mechanics. Now, it doesn't have to. One, you could say, well, yeah, because we are going to piggyback on movies and visual, you know, sort of fine arts, and put mechanics. And yeah, our mechanics will never be artistic, but it's just a different way to deliver those already existing artistic tools, or you know, that's a valid answer to it. But I think we have to at least go, okay, that's what we're doing.
Right.
versus going video games are art. It's like, well,
Right.
the essence of what your game is, if you strip away a lot of the surface stuff, is it still art? I think that's
Right.
the best answer. If you play a game like Flower that I consider beautiful and relevant and important and wonderful, and you strip away all that stuff, it's still a great game.
Right.
But does it carry the emotional weight?
weight.
And the fact that the answer is probably no, does it matter? To me, it matters only in the question of, can interactivity be art? It doesn't take anything away from Flower, but it does make me go, okay, you got to do it through the gameplay.
Yeah.
If all the visuals went away and it was you're playing with cubes, it should still have some kind of resonance.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then either games just aren't capable or we haven't cracked the nut yet.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, like, art is anything that is made by someone and given to someone else.
Yeah, but then you get the definition of art is almost, because art is like, it's not so, I'm not sitting here saying is it art, and let's get into a debate about what the definition of art is, but it's more, maybe a better word is it emotional, is it evocative,
Sure.
is it something that kicks you in the gut and resonates on a level that speaks to your spirit and soul. Well, yeah, that's art. Jaffe left the glass on the table at 6:45. I mean, whatever.
Thank
Who
you,
cares?
Jaffe.
But it's more about is the interactivity capable of speaking to your spirit?
Right.
That, I think, is the more important definition that we need, or the quest we need to be on. Whether, oh look, we have our games in some fucking museum. Who cares? That doesn't matter. E.T. is art. You know what I'm saying? I don't give a fuck if critics call it art or not. It speaks to me, and that's important. Whereas Devil May Cry Love doesn't speak to me. It's fun, and that's just as important as other things. Sure. I think there's a great nobility in offering the world fun and camaraderie and tension and excitement. That's why I'm always like, I don't give a fuck if end of the day that can't be done through games, at least not in this century. Maybe we have to have the holodeck to do that, but right now we can't. I'm okay, because if I go to my grave and I'm like, hey, Jaffe worked with a lot of people to give the world smiles and fun and excitement, and what a great thing to have contributed.
Exactly.
So.
And you have so far, and I think that you will in the future.
I hope so.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
This has been a pleasure.
Cool.
Truly.
It's been fun.
All right, man.
All right.
All right.
Cool.
It's been State of Play. Brandon Bales. Thanks for watching.